Hey, what's going on everybody? My name is TAETRO here at 343 Labs, and I want to do a tutorial with you today to talk about how you can take loop-based music. You know, if you've got those projects, Ableton projects, where you just have some session loops, but you can't quite finish the track. I'm going to show you how you can take that loop-based music and actually arrange it in a way that can be a full finished track. Let's check it out. Right, so if you know anything about my work, you know that I create a lot of videos for social media, YouTube, Instagram. And the thing about doing beats, especially for Instagram, is that they can only be 1 minute long. So I've learned to sort of create interesting musical ideas, but arrange them in a way that keeps a visual consumer or even a listener interested. But when I want to take those tracks and make them full, closer to 3 minutes, so I can release them on Spotify, I've got to do some work with the arrangement so that all those repetitive loops actually sound interesting to the listener. And that's something I've done with this project here. This is a track called As Night Falls from my most recent release, Beat Sketches Volume 2. And I'm going to go through it and show you how I took some simple loops and kind of exploded them into an arrangement that gets close to 3 minutes, so it's a full finished track. Let's check it out. So the initial loop here is just 2 chords. Not a lot of low end here because I've actually automated it out until you hear it sweep back in. So you can create 2 functions for a loop by sweeping out a frequency, especially low end, because low end carries bass frequencies. The sound really has a different character if it's not carrying any bass. And when you bring bass in, it's essentially creating a new function for that loop. And I'm signifying the transition into a new section by sweeping in with those low frequencies. So let's hear that transition into the new section. This is the initial groove of the track. So again, a lot of simplicity here, and that's going to be the key for this whole project. I've got the loop that you've already heard from the intro, 4 bars. And now we've added a shaker loop, a drum pattern, kick and snare, over those chords which sound different because they're side chained. So they're a little choppier, they're reacting to the kick drum. And we kind of set the tone of the song because we let that groove happen for about 8 bars. In the next 8 bar section, we add a bass line. So really only adding 1 element here. We're going to transition into adding a couple different new elements in the next section. So let's hear. So you notice that we kind of recognize that a new section is coming by dropping out some drums. Don't always have to add something to signify a transition. You can drop things. Dropping drums is a popular way to do that. But I also had a vocal sample kind of swell into this new section. And that vocal sample sort of transitions into a more granular lead, which plays over the groove that we just heard. So we're hearing this. But then we're just going to add a sort of granular lead over that, and it adds such a different layer melodically and harmonically that it makes the section interesting to listen to. There's not a ton new happening, just that one new element. Coming up, we're going to introduce a new melody, a vocal sample melody. All the drums have been swept away, so we know that we're sort of building onto something new. Shaker loop coming back in. Before we go on, I want to talk about why I think this section works. So we're carrying over a lot of the same elements. We're carrying over the chords, the shaker percussion, as well as that granular lead. And we're bringing in that vocal melody that we alluded to in this transition. With those similar elements, we're making slight adjustments, right? So this chord section right here, it's no longer choppy because there's no kick drum happening, so it's not getting side chained. Then we're bringing back in the shaker to sort of add some more movement. And we're bringing in this tribal drum element. And of course, we talked about dropping things out to signify a transition. We can also build up tension by adding swells, things like this. So we did one on the way in. And we're going to do one on the way into the next section too. Also, being that this section is a sparse 4 bars, we want to still keep the listener interested and not stop all momentum. So the momentum is carried by the tribal drums. The listener is interested in the new melody. We push the movement a little bit forward with a big drop here, as well as a shaker. So the track is not coming to a grinding halt in this section. And now we're going to transition into the middle 8, which is the most new section out of any of this track, because we're actually going to switch up our drums a little bit. It's the same basic pattern, but we've changed our snare sound. It's also got the same bass sound, but the notes are different, so the harmony is going to be different throughout this section. And what I did was I actually resampled, if you can see this audio on track 9, I resampled the chords and then chopped them up a little bit. So while most of this section had nice pounding drums and long drawn out chords and sounds, this is going to be the most choppy section. So it contrasts the original groove, but it takes elements and makes them familiar while also playing different musical ideas. It's very, very sparse. I mean, look how many layers are active here. 2, 3, 4. That shaker keeps the momentum going, also gives us something familiar to hear. Dropping out drums, vocal transition. So in the final 16 bars of the track, you can hear that we just kind of went from our middle 8 and reverted back to all familiar material. The groove is exactly the same as it was right here. But what we've done is we took this vocal melody from that sparse section and we've layered it over our groove. So while these are all elements that we've heard before of the track, they're arranged and put together in a new condensed way, which is interesting for a listener. We've also included the tribal drums. And that's 8 bars of this. And now the final culminating 8 bars that we're coming to, it's basically going to include every element that's been in the entire track, because we're going to add in that chopped up sample over the top of everything. So literally everything you've heard going from this project from the beginning is going to culminate together at the end. All things we've heard before, no real new musical ideas happening, but it's still interesting to a listener because you've arranged it in a new way. And this is really important for loop-based music. You don't always have to bring in something new. The listener is actually looking for familiar things to catch on to. That's why songs are called catchy, right? So this is the final 8 bars, bringing everything together. And then a nice outro, including some of the tribal drums and granular lead. We sort of let things play out with effects, right? So I guess the point of this tutorial is to show you don't need a ton of musical ideas to make a really interesting, close to 3-minute track. The base of this groove, meaning the chords and the drums and the overall feel, you've heard right at the beginning. That is not that different than what you're hearing here. It's just a lot more epic because of the elements we've added, like the vocal sample, the tribal drums, and later on, the chopped sample. But if I gave you all of that at the beginning, there would be no tension and nothing to build up to. So if you're smart about the way you introduce your musical ideas, you can almost look at this project sort of from a surface level and zoom out view, right? We introduce very few musical ideas and build them up over time. So you can see by this section, sort of building up familiar material, right up to here, introducing some new material, but also leaving behind some old material like the drums for this middle sparse section, creating something that's a bit of a departure for a middle 8. So taking the harmonic content of this chord loop that we've heard so many times already, getting rid of that because it's played throughout the entire track up to here, and bringing in something new to carry the track. Revert back to something familiar, but combine it with something new. And then finally, bring it all together, if you can, without it being a mess, for a nice triumphant ending. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you haven't yet, go check out my music on Spotify. This track is called As Night Falls from the Beat Sketches Volume 2. And I'm here at 343 Labs, which you should subscribe to this channel if you want to see more tutorials. 343 Labs is an electronic music school in New York and online. The website is in the description as well. Thanks so much for watching. This is TAETRO for 343 Labs. Have a good one.